from Anderson Hall on the UNL campus. You're listening to Delay of Game on 90.3 KRNU and online at krnu.unl.edu.
And a big hello to you all here as we welcome you to the Delay of Game podcast here on this Wednesday, December the 17th. Officially on our little winter break, but that doesn't mean we're going to not bring you one more final edition of Josh Peterson's top 5, not college football games, but bowl games to watch this upcoming winter festival that's on its way. So let's get to it.
It's time now for the part of the show that should capture everyone's attention. Delay of Game and 90.3 KRNU bring you the most intelligent co-hosts in the state of Nebraska. Josh Peterson from Unsportsmanlike Conduct on 1620 The Zone in Omaha. What for, you ask? To give us his top 5 college football games that he's looking forward to this weekend. Do I have your attention now? If not, here is Josh Peterson's top 5 college football games to watch this weekend.
And he joins us via the Delay of Game Intenseness hotline, Josh Peterson, for his top 5 bowl games to watch for this wonderful end of December, beginning of January break. Josh, how you doing, my friend?
I am very well, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing spectacular. You know, the last time that we spoke, we unfortunately got interrupted by the Nebraska email list from the athletic department. But
Yes.
I'm sure that this time there's not possibly anything that could interrupt us now, but crazier things have happened, I guess, you know. Somebody could start a fire up there at NRG.
Well, don't say that, you jerk. What are you trying to do?
Yeah, I'm not trying to do anything.
Oh, look at
It's
that.
just
A fire started. I got to leave now. Bye, Ryan. Have a good show, Ryan. Unbelievable.
Hey, I always prepare for the worst at times, you know?
Apparently.
Yeah. Well, anyways, with your wonderful bowl games here, I am only going to assume that you absolutely have Nevada and Louisiana Lafayette in the R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl. Am I correct?
Ryan, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do right now? I'm gonna set this up real fast.
Yes, sir.
I could have had playoff games in here, of course. I could have any of the New Year's 6 games in here. I am not going to cheat. That's too easy, and it would be boring. I'm going to have one New Year's 6 game, and it's not going to be a playoff game. And then every other game I do is going to be a non-New Year's. I mean, they can be on New Year's or they could be on the 31st, but they're not going to be any of the quote-unquote New Year's 6 games. I just wanted to throw that out there right off the bat.
Yeah, that's definitely fine. I like it. That's the more original, the better. So
look at that. I'm original. Look at that, Mom and Dad. You said it couldn't be done. All righty. So let's start with number 5.
Yes, sir.
I'm going with the Belk Bowl at number 5, December 30th. Georgia versus Louisville. This game is really intriguing to me for a variety of reasons. I like, of course, the talent on Georgia's squad. Louisville in year one of the new and the second Bobby Petrino era. Still a decent amount of talent. They, of course, played Florida State in that really good game. I have no idea what to expect in this game, but I do think Louisville is going to keep it close. Mm-hmm. I just don't know how it's going to happen. Is it going to be low scoring with some defense? Is it going to be high scoring? I think this is actually going to be a pretty solid game, and it's on the 30th, and it kicks off at, as I scroll to the time right now, it kicks off at 5:30 here in Nebraska on December 30th. So, right before New Year's. I think this is a really intriguing game. I look forward to the Belk Bowl, Georgia versus Louisville.
The over-under, the over-under is 56 with the line favoring Georgia at 6.5. Both teams 9-3 on the season. Of course, coming from their respective conferences. This would be actually a really, really fun matchup. And I think I said Georgia to win this one, if I'm correct. I don't have my predictions pulled up as quickly as I'd like here, but I certainly think I said Georgia to win this matchup as you do. Let's move on to number 4.
Number 4 is actually the day before the matchup we just went over. This is the Russell Athletic Bowl Oklahoma versus Clemson. I think that this is a solid one just by name alone. You have Oklahoma definitely underachieved this season. We thought Trevor Knight and the Sooners were perhaps on their way to the playoff. And you know what? I think that we definitely overestimated Trevor Knight based off of one game last year. One game against Oklahoma, and suddenly he was the best thing of all time. And so that was a bit much. Clemson, on the other hand, they had some issues. They had some injuries. Another team that played Florida State really close. I think this is a team, even with the loss of Chad Morris to SMU, that is going to kind of use this game to springboard into next season. So I look forward to seeing what happens in this matchup. I think it's going to be a really good game. It kicks off in the afternoon on December 29th, about 4:30 here in Nebraska. So I think this will be a good game. I actually like Clemson, and I think kind of a rough season for Oklahoma comes to a merciful end, and the Sooners just kind of start looking to next year, and they say, let's put this one in the past.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Even though Vegas apparently knows something we don't, saying the line is a 3 in favor of Oklahoma, and the over-under is 54. But with that said, I am going to go with Clemson 30-20. And by the way, I said Georgia 45-27. But yeah, Clemson, I think, clearly is the stronger team than Oklahoma, who, as you said, has had a very challenging and has struggled a lot more than people were expecting this season, especially with the loss at home against Oklahoma State, the rally there for the Cowboys. So that's another good bowl. Number 3 now.
Number 3, I think this is a really exciting matchup in the Alamo Bowl between Kansas State and UCLA. This is actually after New Year's. This is all the way on January the 2nd. It's a late afternoon, early evening kickoff at 5:45. We know around here, of course, about Kansas State. We know a little bit about UCLA since Nebraska saw them not this season but the previous 2. I think this is going to be an interesting game. Another team in UCLA came in with a lot of expectations. I had them in the playoff before the season. They did not reach those. They had a lot of issues on the offensive line throughout. Brett Hundley struggled at points, a lot of that because of the offensive line. On the other side, Kansas State, who at one point they were very much in that conversation for the playoff. They struggled down the stretch. They lost to TCU and they lost to Baylor, but still a very good football team. They're playing in a tough conference with those two teams at the top. They had a nice win over Oklahoma earlier in the season. I think this is a great game. I think the Alamo Bowl got a heck of a matchup, and this is one that I think it could end up being pretty low scoring just because of the offensive line for UCLA. And, while Kansas State certainly can score points, they're not always this team that races out and is putting up 40-50. So I think this could be a nice, and now that it's weird to say that 30-27 is low scoring in college football, but it certainly feels that way. I like Kansas State in this matchup.
It's an even line, believe it or not, with an over-under of 59.5. I think Kansas State's probably going to win this one pretty soundly, 41-28, just because I have not. Now, UCLA, granted, is 9-3, but their 3 losses have been, Oregon, USC, Oregon. No, I'm thinking of the wrong team here. I'm going to have to look up what their losses are, but it's been a weird season for UCLA. It was Oregon. Previously, it was Utah by 2.
Yep.
And then just really got owned by Stanford in the last game of the season. So I have to go with Kansas State, mainly because I feel that, I don't know, the Auburn game still sticks out in my mind. If Kansas State gets those field goals, they might have beat the Tigers. But yet here we are standing where we are. And Kansas State is in the Alamo Bowl against UCLA. But I got Kansas State for this one. All right, moving on to number 2.
Number 2, and I think I would have had this game in my top 5. It might have been a few rungs lower. But Auburn, Wisconsin I have now here because of Barry Alvarez coming back to coach another game. And you just kind of wonder what will happen here. I've liked Auburn all season long. I thought that for the majority of the season they were the best team in the country. They ended up proving me wrong there. They lost a few games. But they lost to good teams for the most part. So I like this Auburn team still quite a bit. Wisconsin on the other side, Melvin Gordon and what he's done, we know about that and his ability to run the football. But what are they going to do with that quarterback position? That said, it's a big-time names game when you see Auburn versus Wisconsin. I think that's pretty cool. It sucks for this game because it's going to get lost amongst all of the January 1st games. I mean, it's on ESPN2 and it kicks off at 11. So it's the first game of the day. But, man, it's just going to get lost with the playoff coming, with the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl, and then some other solid games throughout the day. So this is definitely going to be one that just, people, they'll definitely watch it, but it will not have, the type of audience that perhaps it normally would, or the type of discussion, rather, than it normally would.
Yeah, absolutely. And Auburn in this one favored by 6.5. Over-under is 62. And I clearly think that Auburn is going to be the winner in this one. I have all these high-scoring games, too, that you keep pulling up in your top 5. I have 45-33. Wouldn't be surprised if it's lower than that, but I think Wisconsin is just, I think they are out of breath at this point. The tank is empty, and they're just going to do whatever they can with Barry Alvarez as their head coach for the second time in 2 years. Of course, Barry Alvarez 0-1 as an athletic director and head coach, and that was against Stanford in the Rose Bowl 2 years back. But they only lost by a touchdown, 2013.
It was a really good game, and that was, of course, the Wisconsin team that was 7-5 going into the Big Ten championship. They beat Nebraska handily, and then they were 8-5. So they finished 8-6 as a Rose Bowl team. Not something you see very often, but that was the year that Ohio State wasn't allowed to go to a bowl game, and they were 12-0, and Penn State missed out on a bowl game, and I believe they were 9-3 or 8-4.
Yeah. Tough stuff, and interesting matchup with Auburn, Wisconsin. And finally now, Josh, number 1.
And now, once again, I have no playoff games. That would be too easy. And if I could have a playoff game, and if I could, I set the parameters myself. If I was going to do one, it would have been the Rose Bowl. I think that's easily the best game of the bowl slate. I cannot wait for Oregon, Florida State. I'm not doing the playoff games. I'm only doing one of the other New Year's Six games. I'm going with the only other New Year's Six game that is actually on New Year's Day, and that's the Cotton Bowl. It's the earliest game of the day as far as the New Year's Six goes, of course, because the playoffs are going to be at 4 and then the and 7:30. Michigan State Baylor, though, contrasting styles. Michigan State, their defense definitely took a step back this season. Baylor's offense also took a step back this season. But I think Baylor's defense got better, and I think Michigan State's offense got better. I think this game is great. I cannot wait to see what happens. I want to see how Baylor comes out, because they definitely feel slighted with what happened with Bob Bowlesby in the Big 12, and the decision not to include them, in the playoff, and the decision not to crown them as the actual champion of the conference. And I think that that's one of the biggest reasons why they got kept out of the playoff, not Ohio State's dominating performance against Wisconsin. So I think it's a great game to start off New Year's Day. So we mentioned the game a few minutes ago, Auburn, Wisconsin. That game is at 11. This game is at 11:30. Minnesota, Missouri is at noon. And then you have that game, the Rose Bowl at 4, and then the Sugar Bowl at 7:30. So 3 pretty good games in that, noon time slot for the most part, for all intents and purposes, and then sets you up for the excellence in the playoff games later in the day. But I think that this Cotton Bowl is going to be awesome. I cannot wait to see Baylor and Michigan State.
Baylor is favored by 3, over-under 71.5. I think that's a great over-under, because I believe that Baylor will win this one 44-27. Right
on the number.
Yeah, quite honestly, I have to say that with how Michigan State played against Oregon, I feel that we're going to have an exact same repeat, per se, in this Cotton Bowl. It's going to be Michigan State maybe in front, Baylor's right there, and then all of a sudden fourth quarter rolls around, boom, there goes Baylor, and game's over at that point, just like it was in Eugene against the Ducks. So got Baylor winning this one. Great top 5. I like it. It was very original and unique.
Oh, thank you. You're too kind.
Now, of course, let's get to the national championship games. Extra time here with Josh Peterson. As we conclude the top 5 bowl games to watch here over the course of bowl season. First, let's start with Oregon and Florida State. Oregon is a 9.5-point favorite. Now, granted, I totally understand per se where Vegas is coming from, and the fact, Florida State is coming from a weaker ACC. Oregon is 12-1, coming from a very solid Pac-12. They have been battle-tested. Even in their loss to Oregon, it wasn't as bad as everybody may think when they look at the score. What do you think is going to happen in this one? I know I certainly am hoping for a blowout victory in favor of the Ducks, just to see Florida State have this long winning streak come to an end. What do you see?
Yeah, listening to me, and I've been on the show, of course, every week throughout the season, I'm not a fan of Florida State. I've wanted their run to end all year long, mainly because of the off-field stuff. I just don't like anything that the Florida State represents right now in college football. That said, even with all their close games and their struggles against much lesser competition, 9 points is way too big of a line here. I just do not see Oregon running away with it. I agree. I hope it happens. But I just don't see it. I've been going back and forth, Ryan, on this game, for the last couple of weeks since it was announced, just wondering, okay, what is going to happen here? Because Florida State, for all their struggles, they've won so many games in a row. They've won 29 straight. On the other side, the Ducks, they are clicking really well right now. They have the best player in college football, in Marcus Mariota, who got the Heisman. And they're playing some really good football. Their offensive line is healthy again. I think Scott Frost is calling some great plays. They just look good. I think this is going to be a really close game. I've gone back and forth on this. I still don't know who I'm going to pick here because I feel like destiny is two matchups. Because if we agree that Alabama is going to beat Ohio State, destiny says, normally there's one thing that you're going to see in those destiny-type situations. This year, there's two. Do we get Alabama, Florida State, the two most dominant programs over the last couple of seasons? Alabama, of course, the most dominant going back to 2008 when they had their first undefeated regular season under Nick Saban. On the other hand, Florida State, the defending national champs, they ended the SEC run last year, and they've been a heck of a team over the last few seasons under Jimbo Fisher. On the other hand, you have Oregon, and fans of the sport have been wanting an Oregon-Alabama game for years now, for about 5, 6 years. Since about the same time Alabama started their run, Oregon did the same, although just at a lesser pace. They went to one national championship, but they did not win that, whereas Alabama has won 3. So I feel like I don't know what to pick because I feel like both of those games would be earned. That said, Ohio State could screw it all up and they could win over Alabama, and then suddenly we're looking at an Ohio State, Florida State, or Ohio State, Oregon. I'm probably going to lean with the Ducks. Just because I feel like this is a culmination of Oregon football over the last 5 or 6 years, and if they do not make the championship with this quarterback, with this team, it's a great run, a great regular season run is what it'll be, a great regular season run. That said, they won the Fiesta Bowl, they won the Rose Bowl, but they still are missing out on that one particular win that we can point to and say they got that one, and so they need that one, and I think I'm going to lean with the Ducks in the Rose Bowl.
Very fair. And then, of course, following that game, as everybody goes back to the East down in New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl, Alabama, Ohio State, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, and the Crimson Tide are a 9.5-point favorite, which I think that one is a little bit too high. Over-under is 58.5. This is the one that I think is, quite honestly, a little bit better than Oregon, Florida State because it's two great head coaches clashing once again, but this time it's the Big Ten, the team that was so scrutinized that even you and I, we were scrutinizing them at the beginning of the season, and now the Big Ten is in the college football playoff represented by Ohio State. And then it's going up against the mothership, the SEC in Alabama. Can it be done by Ohio State to, I guess, maybe get everybody to just be quiet, to shut up about the Big Ten criticism and quiet the SEC bias, quote unquote, around that there, or is Alabama just going to run away with this one?
It's really unfortunate that JT Barrett's hurt because I think that narrative would have much more play. Whereas I don't think that narrative has as much play because of who Alabama's going up against, and essentially the third-string quarterback in Cardale Jones from before the season, but definitely the second-string quarterback all season long in Jones behind J.T. Barrett with the Braxton Miller injury a few days before the season started. So I think that just kind of discussion isn't there as much. That said, I do think that the line, I think that's a good number just because Alabama is so impressive. And while I think they can definitely be had, they lost this year. They've lost, they haven't had an undefeated season overall since 2009, so it's been 5 years. But I think with as much time as they're going to have to prepare for Ohio State, I think that's the problem. I think they could be had in the championship game because it's such a quick turnaround, and I think that Oregon and Florida State are both better teams than Ohio State. That said, in this matchup with this quarterback, I think Alabama. I don't think they're going to blow them out like they did Notre Dame, but I definitely think that they will win pretty comfortably. 10 to 14 points, somewhere in that range.
Very, very fair. Finally, there's with these bowl games, there's also there's a Nebraska football game going on too that everybody is kind of forgotten about. I don't know what the narrative between you and John Bishop is up there. As far as, I guess, excitement levels for this bowl game, I know down here it's kind of like, yeah, that's Nebraska USC. That's nice. Can we get Mike Riley to start coaching now? And that at least that's the feeling down here. Nebraska and USC in the Holiday Bowl. The Trojans favored by 6.5, ranked 24th in the country. Barney Cotton coaching this game of all people. Thoughts on this Holiday Bowl for Nebraska?
I feel like bowl games for the most part are pretty useless. Outside of the playoff, outside of previous years of the championship, they're pretty worthless. They don't mean anything. Last year, Oklahoma beat Alabama and meant nothing for this season. Alabama was probably disappointed that they lost to Auburn. They didn't go to the championship game. This game is truly meaningless. I mean, it's the old coaching staff with Barney Cotton as head coach. The new coaching staff has no part in this. They are actually out recruiting right now. They're doing all this other recruiting stuff. This game, I have no idea because I don't know what to expect from USC on the other side. It really is a worthless game. It has no bearings on next season. It's just one that the players will get a trip to San Diego. The writers will get a trip to San Diego covering the team. So good on them for getting some nice weather when it's 5 degrees back here in Nebraska. But it really is pretty worthless. I have no idea even which way to pick. I guess you go with USC. I guess I would go with USC because Nebraska needs to get that fourth loss so they can have another 9-4 season. I'll lean that way just because destiny says Nebraska is 9 and forever. So let's go with USC in this one.
Oh, that's great. All right, yeah, I'm gonna just be a homer and go with Nebraska, but yeah,
I would expect nothing less from you, Ryan.
Exactly. At this point, literally everybody, except the players and coaches, well, maybe even the coaches, they just want to get to this Mike Riley era at Nebraska. They want the spring game to get here, and then after that, they want to take a month off, and then, all right, boom, we're ready to go. Nebraska baseball's done. Nebraska football, let's go. So that's what everybody essentially is wanting down here. And speaking of Mike Riley, of course, the last time we had you on, we got cut short because of the announcement that Mike Riley would be the new hire for head coach here at Nebraska, and we never really got your thoughts on the hire. What were they?
Well, at that moment in time, I don't know if you still have the audio somewhere, I was in shock. I couldn't believe it.
It sounded like you were, yeah.
Yeah, that we talked about hires. Nick Bon and I had been talking for a week about, this hire, and it feels like it's going to come out of left field. That one came, it was in the stands, beyond the third base, foul pole. It was that far out of left field. The more I've read up on it, though, and the way I've seen him attack recruiting, the way I've seen him put together his staff, I think that it's a pretty good hire. Now, the question is pretty good enough? He is not being hired to beat Wisconsin. He is not being hired to beat Minnesota to win the West. He is hired to beat Ohio State and win the conference. Nebraska hasn't won a conference since 1999. That is what this is about. That is what Nebraska is about now moving forward. Is he the guy to do that? I don't know. I want to see who his coordinators are. They have not been announced yet. I want to see who his offensive coordinator is. I want to see the ideas behind them. I want to see who his defensive coordinator is and what they do. I want to see if they add another, dynamite recruiter to the staff or just a dynamite recruiter. But I early on, I like what I've seen. I've liked the way that they've embraced social media, and I think it's a good hire. But I don't. Let's see if they can go from a good to a great hire, because he's definitely a good talent evaluator, if not a great talent evaluator. He can coach guys up, but he struggled. His record, it is what it is, and they struggled over the last 5 years. Only 2 seasons above 500 there after a pretty great run at Oregon State, but it's tough to win at Oregon State. So we'll see. I think it's a good hire. let's see if it can become a great hire over the offseason and then into the 2015 football season.
Yeah, defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator still yet to be officially announced. And now that the Ed Orgeron talk has kind of quieted down, I think it was a nice idea at the time, but quite honestly, Josh, I just don't think that Ed Orgeron is going to be coming to Nebraska. Now, I'm not saying that the book is officially closed on that, but it would certainly think that, maybe not at this point, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. But I think the question is, who's the offensive coordinator going to be? I mean, do you have any ideas as to who it could possibly be?
I have absolutely none. It's been amazing how tight-lipped everything has been. We were talking about it on the show earlier this week, and why has there not been a name that has been leaked? And John and I had a couple theories. One was, they just don't have their guy. They have no idea who it is. Two, it's coming out of the NFL. The NFL season, 2 weeks to go still in the regular season. Maybe it's coming out of the NFL and then they're just waiting to announce it. Or three, the coach is currently in college. And not only are they in college, but perhaps they're involved in a playoff game. Perhaps they're involved in one of these big games and they don't want to screw it up now. I'm not saying that means it's Scott Frost. I'm just saying that, perhaps that's one of the reasons why they've waited. Maybe they're going after someone from Alabama staff, maybe someone from Ohio State staff, etc. So there are 4 teams in the playoff. I'm not just saying it's Scott Frost, but I would lean towards the latter two, either someone in the NFL or someone who is currently coaching in college football that they don't want to tear away yet from the bowl game or the playoff.
Very, very fair. And that's exactly kind of what I said, is that they're waiting for that chance to, once the bowl game ends, and then, at least for Nebraska, and then this whole college football playoff stuff ends, then that's when they go after it. But, it's kind of a long time for Husker fans to wait, but it makes sense, though, because it's the right time. It's not that long of a time to wait, though, so we'll certainly see what happens. And finally, before we let you go here, Bo Pelini, hired at Youngstown State. He's going home. I think this is great. This is wonderful for him because he gets to still be the head coach, but it's at a lower-end school, an FCS school, and it's in his own backyard. What are your thoughts?
I think it's good for a variety of reasons, and I think the jury is going to be out on a few others. As far as good goes, this is nowhere near the limelight of Nebraska, and I think that that's something that is going to be really important for Bo. A loss at Youngstown State, it's a very proud program, a national championship program, but it's nowhere near what it is at Nebraska, so the fans aren't going to, call for him to be fired anytime they lose and they struggle. So I think that's a good thing. I think he's going to really enjoy just not being in the limelight and being able to, for the most part, coach. Like I said, though, it's still a proud program, a championship-winning program. As far as the jury still being out, though, I'm not a X's and O's guy. The highest level of football that I played was, ninth grade football, so I can't really speak to this. But people that are smarter than I, that I trust, that I talk to, they have said that his schemes they've been kind of broken for a few years. And so, we always talked about, oh, man, he needs a Ndamukong Suh, he needs a Levante David, he needs this guy and that guy if he's going to succeed. Well, he's not going to have anywhere near those type of athletes at Youngstown State. He didn't have them at Nebraska for the most part, and he struggled. And Nebraska has much better talent than Youngstown State does. So, when I talk to people and they say those types of things, and then I obviously know that, hey, it's much tougher to recruit, and he's not going to have anywhere near the type of talent at Youngstown that he did at Nebraska, I kind of wonder, and I say, well, yeah, his defense was good at points, but what's it going to be now, with these types of players, with these types of athletes there? So I think that's going to be intriguing. I think that his system definitely needs some tweaking, perhaps a lot of tweaking. I think that we saw that over the last few seasons in games and how they lined up and how they played, and the ability for teams just to run roughshod on them. So. That said, I think this is a much better job just for him as far as a personal thing goes. Obviously, he's returning home, so I imagine he's pumped for that. But I still want to see how good of a coach he really is, and if he will use this as a springboard to another job, or if maybe this is a job that he's kind of meant to have for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. We will see what happens with Bo as He takes the job at Youngstown State in Ohio, and that is going to do it here for our for this edition of the Delay of Game podcast. And one final time with Josh Peterson here. Josh, it has been a pleasure, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and your prep for Unsportsmanlike Conduct on 1620 The Zone to join us and get all this wonderful college football fun in here on Delay of Game, my friend.
Absolutely, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me on all season long.
Thank you, sir. Josh Peterson, Unsportsmanlike Conduct, 2 to 6 every Monday through Friday on 1620 The Zone. That is going to do it for this edition of the Delay of Game podcast here on this Wednesday, December 17th. We will see you on Monday, the 29th, for Delay of Game at 4 p.m. Central Time on 90.3 KRNU.